Hey everyone, welcome to a special edition of Brainscratch Searchlight. I'm your host, John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. We are going to be speaking to guest Mike the Cop. He is an active police officer, also a YouTuber, filling a very important need that I see in terms of bridging the gap between officers and citizens and helping us understand each other a little bit better. So this is a bit of a challenging conversation because we're going to try to take one specific issue that I've heard about time and time again, particularly from the families of missing persons, and that is filing that missing persons report. So before we cut over to Mike, I just want to remind you guys, I've done one segment with him last week on JohnnyVlogs. If you want to learn more about Mike and his channel, please check that out. I will also have links to his channel in the description box below. And with all that said, let's welcome Mike the Cop back to the show. Hey, Mike.
What's up?
Hey, nice to talk to you again. Thank you so much for giving us some more of your time and hopefully helping us understand something that's been a bit challenging ever since I've started looking into missing persons cases. So let me give you a little bit of backstory on where this challenge has come from. Early on, I was hearing from several families of missing persons cases that they were having trouble getting the report filed. They kept hearing about this rule that it couldn't be filed for the first 48 hours, or sometimes it's 24 hours, sometimes it's 72 hours. This rule keeps kind of fluctuating. And I did a little research on it back at that time, and I found, I believe it was some legal websites that were talking about there is no law about this type of rule. There's definitely no law. There's no legal reason why that report can't be filed as soon as people, try to file it. So I have been contacted by a few different people saying, John, I know there might not be a law, but that's not necessarily all that's going on here. I was contacted by a dispatcher, and she told me that there was at least policies within her department that prohibited her from taking missing persons reports before that time period. And her thing was, she's like, I can get in trouble. They're telling me this is a policy. I'm supposed to follow this policy, or I can get in trouble for not following it. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to a family member who works in a DA's office to try to get some more information on this. This is information from California, and of course, keep in mind, we've got a lot of different variations from state to state here. But according to her, anyone can file a missing persons report at any time. It can be a police department policy that they will not investigate until a certain time has passed in certain circumstances, depending on the age of the person and circumstances surrounding their disappearance. For example, if it's a child, they will most likely investigate right away, especially if it's a young child and the disappearance seems criminal related. For adults with special needs, they would likely be treated in that same policy as children. It would get filed more quickly. For adults, if there's no foul play suspected, they might have a time period where they wait prior to investigating. Moral of the story is, it's my understanding people can report at any time, but it will be case specific with regards to the resources used to actually locate the person. So let me ask you, have you ever filed a missing persons report?
I have never filed one. Do you mean have I ever dealt with one?
Taken one, yeah.
Yeah, so no one, fortunately, in my life I've had to deal with that. I have, plenty of times have been on the receiving end of missing person reports. Yeah. Never, again, fortunately, it's never been like any legit kidnapping, something like that to where, hey, I was in the store and my kid is gone. I've responded to those calls where someone thought that their kid was gone or thought that their kid was taken. And, kids have a tendency to go hide places. So you end up, finding them. Obviously, those cases where that happens is super serious and tragic. And again, fortunately, I've never had to deal with that directly. And that would actually fall into the purview of the federal government anyway. Like, local police would only be involved, I think, like at a very initial level, and then that would end up being translated to the FBI anyway. So most of the time for missing persons, I would say, if we try to kind of break it down, I would say 7 out of 10 are parents whose juvenile children have basically taken off And, they decided they were done with mom and dad's rules for a few days or whatever it was. And sometimes that would be a recurring thing in the community with particular kids. Other times it'd be one-off. But that would be like most of the situations would be a parent coming in and saying, hey, my kid's missing.
Right.
So missing as in ran away. Yeah. So, but not missing as in likely taken per se. So
you're making an important distinction there. First of all, in many of these cases, the person is actually found relatively quickly, like typically within 72 hours, I think is an average. It's kicked around a lot. And you're talking about, in particular, it sounds like most of the cases you hear about are kids that are running away for one reason or another. I know when we had the big scare of the missing persons cases in DC that we had mentioned in the last interview I had with you, I actually tracked all of those cases, and all of those kids wound up being found. So it does challenge us, I think, because we know on both sides of this equation, obviously the concerned citizen and the police officer, that many of these cases don't really need necessarily your resources. But how do we know when it is that case? You've got a mother that's concerned, you've got a father that's concerned, and their kid has never done this before. It's a really tough thing to navigate. And so in your day-to-day work right now, do you know of any policy specifically with the department you're working at now where you can't take a report if someone called you out?
Nope. I've worked for multiple departments in my career, and there's never been, policy books can sometimes be like this.
Sure.
So maybe there was one, but it was certainly never a policy that actually was in use. We basically took things on a case-by-case basis. The only time we would always take the report. So like there's the informal part of taking a report for a missing person, and there's like a formalized part. And the formalized part would be where that person's information is entered into LEAN. It's the Law Enforcement Information Network.
Okay.
So it's a massive database of law enforcement information. So you're going to get if you run that person's name in LEAN, you'll get kicked back if they had warrants for their arrest. You get kicked back if they have personal protection orders that they're involved with, or any number of things. There's other networks too, like NCIC and others. But so there's the informal part where you decide basically based on the circumstances of what I'm understanding this person making the report to say. Does this need to be entered into a national database and formalized as a missing person or a runaway person who is in danger? Okay. If it's a juvenile, we're going to err on the side of caution. Right. I always have. I'm going to enter them into the system, because then any time that person comes in contact with law enforcement, it's going to give basically a code and a phone number to get back to our department. Right. And the parents are agreeing by filing the report that no matter where their child is found, they're going to go get them.
Okay. So
if their kid ran away, I'm in Michigan. If their kid's found in Indiana with friends out joyriding somewhere, well, they're driving to Indiana. Right. And the parents, if they were saying like, well, they can stay in Indiana, well, now you're probably going to be charged with parental neglect, right? So like, so there's all these little shades of things, but it's got to be like, let's say that, Billy ran away from home 6 times in 2016 for 2 days at a time. And it's February of 2017, and mom and dad come in, hey, Billy is gone. Okay. So if we have the time and resources before we would even formalize that, you say like, all right, can we allocate 2 cars to go to the places we found Billy before? Right. Can we cover those bases before we put him into the system, and formalize that? Once it's formalized, patrol level officers will keep an eye out. It'll be like on a list of things that we should be paying attention for. And that list sometimes is small, sometimes it's really long. Like we got 3 vehicles that we're keeping an eye out for from crimes. We got, we're looking for Billy, we're looking for Joey, we're looking for Sally, all these other things. And I don't know why I'm picking names from the 70s, but so, that's sort of like the most common thing. Now, obviously, if mom comes in and is like, listen, my daughter has come home at the same time every day. She has never done this, and you look and you're just interacting with the parent, and you know, like, you know, and you try to dig a little bit, like, has there been issues at home, or you try to get the context of the situation.
Right.
Then you're like, man, we need to really escalate this because this doesn't seem right.
Okay.
You know, even if it ended up being nothing, you know, I've seen it. I've seen where, like, a kid just decides, like, now's the time I'm going to be an idiot.
Right.
You know, I've seen it, but it's, you know, you kind of look at those situations. So there's a big difference between how the Billies that run away all the time might be viewed in terms of that process versus, you know, the daughter that just never came home from school. Like that would be, you know,
what I'm hearing from you is context is really important in these cases. So
100%.
There is a bit of a determining factor that the responding officer is making based on the context that they're being told of this disappearance.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So, and at the risk of sounding like ambivalent toward it, which I'm not, you know, let's say that you have a city where it was not uncommon for us to be working with maybe 3 or 4 guys on the road, and we're each taking 15 to 20 reports in a shift. You know, it's just super busy. Right. So if some guy over here is getting his head bashed in with a bottle at a bar, I can't go look for Billy right now. Right. Billy ran away from home 6 times before. You know, now if it's like, hey, somebody tossed Billy in a van, you got to believe me. Even though Billy ran away 6 times before, like, he didn't do it on his own this time. Okay. Now we might be calling mutual aid from other departments to say, hey, we got to go find Billy. Can you help us with the guy got bashed his head in at the bar, whatever. Like, right. So you got to try to allocate those resources exactly based on the context.
That's why I really appreciate being able to talk to you about this stuff, because getting that type of insight is invaluable. You guys are constantly having to prioritize your work based on urgency of the calls.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I imagine that there's probably very little time where you guys aren't doing anything, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can go be proactive, and in the times where you can, like, not do anything, you kind of, like, enjoy that and just go be a deterrent. Just drive through the neighborhoods, you know, and be a presence. But you know, the other like, so 7 out of 10 maybe were like the runaway juveniles, and then, you know, you get a couple that are maybe it's an adult with special needs. They've walked out from a group home. Yes. And nobody knows where they're at, or an elderly person with severe Alzheimer's, and they just walked out of the house and they're gone, you know. And those are those things where, again, you got to say, what can we do to help this situation right now? Like those will typically get entered into the law enforcement information network. And, you know, I can think of only very few times where we had to delay going to look for someone like that, because usually it's kind of like, oh, you know, as soon as they're noticed missing, they're calling. So usually you can find them very quickly. Okay. But you know, the toughest cases aren't the juveniles, because they're not that smart. It's the Alzheimer's patients, because it's completely unpredictable. Yeah. Where they might go or what they might do. It's like there's no way to figure that out. Yeah, I've definitely noticed that trend in the cases I've covered, and we've covered cases exactly fitting the mold you're talking about. Yeah, elderly people, people with developmental disabilities can also be somewhat unpredictable, and there is a strange trend I see in terms of adults. Sometimes people that have issues with drug abuse in their past. Yep. Sometimes they've tangled up with the law a little bit. Maybe they're living with their parents. And I've literally had several cases where it's this person went walking to a liquor store or to a gas station and just disappeared. Right.
And it's terrible because in those cases, you look at their past and you look at everything. It's like, oh, well, maybe they're running away from a drug dealer because they owe them money, or maybe they're running away from their next court appearance, or there's so many reasons that you can key into that. But the truth of the matter is we really don't know. And there could be something really bad that has happened in that situation. And unfortunately, because of what you're talking about, being able to have the right context for that disappearance and how it's explained to you guys, your response to it's going to vary a little bit. If some guy just says, yeah, my 31-year-old was walking to, the local gas station and just disappeared, obviously that's going to be a much different call than my elderly father who's forgetful, went driving, and is now missing.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, obviously, like, there's sort of like the least serious ones where like a guy just sort of like ghosted his girlfriend and she wants to report him missing, but really he just doesn't like her anymore. It's just like you've got that, and then you've got the things where like you have a parent, like that's saying, hey, I know my son is 38 and lives on his own, but I have not, like, I think something's wrong.
Right.
We can absolutely enter a missing persons report based on those contexts, but we follow the same procedure pretty much. You got like that informal level where at a patrol level, like I'm just the guy with the badge at the desk that takes the report or goes to the house and takes the report.
Right.
I can say, okay, I can go to the 3 places, that his parents say that he frequents, or, I can check local hotels in our jurisdiction to see is he checked in there. I can do those basic things, but then at the end of that, I'm going to turn that into a report, and it's going to get submitted to a boss who then will enter that in. We would send it to dispatch and say, enter this person into lien as, possibly endangered, and there's actually a way to note in that system that this is potentially a drug issue, or something like that. So it exists.
And then the case moves, right? I mean, you might be working it for that first day that it's reported and kind of doing those initial checks, but at some point, typically another investigator's going to pick it up, right?
Yeah, it would have to be either that detective bureau at the local level, or, for counties that have the resources. There are counties or state departments that would have like missing persons divisions. Yeah. Typically not in rural areas are you going to find those kind of resources, but in major cities, metropolitan areas, there should be or are, major cases or missing persons and stuff like that. But again, I mean, I don't know if this is just the nature of life. Obviously everything gets prioritized, and as if my son was missing, drug related or not, obviously I would want him to be found. I would want him to be alive. I'd want him to be safe. I want him to get the help he needs. Right. But at the end of the day, from when you take the personal passion out of that and you look and go, okay, so we've got 5 people to try to find, and this was an 11-year-old taken at a park. It was number 1. Number 2 is, grandpa with Alzheimer's. Number 3 is, you work your way down. Then you got, well, Joe is a heroin addict and left home. Like, how do you decide who to go save, who to try to find, without having unlimited resources? So, yeah, I mean, it's just a tough reality of life. I think that sucks. And hopefully you just encounter civil servants that want to work their hardest, and do the best to find as many people as they can.
Now, let me ask you, in cases like that where you do have a list and you're thinking about all these different cases that you're trying to work, where does where does traffic stops fall in among that? where does your attention go to all of a sudden, the other laws that you're upholding and supporting?
Yeah, so you've got a lot of departments allocate traffic, like officers that's their job. They do traffic enforcement. Yeah. Other departments will you just kind of like mix it in. So if you go from call 1 to call 2. You write a couple of reports like, okay, I'm not going on any calls right now. There's an expectation of, okay, I should, go out and be proactive in traffic enforcement or whatever else. And so like every department will have their own expectations for their community. Like some communities, like where I'm working right now, traffic isn't much of an issue,
Yeah.
But in other places, you'll have people calling every day, hey, so-and-so speeding in this area or this traffic, this whatever. So you kind of like are trying to get out there and respond to the needs of your community that they're asking you to deal with. So I think it just varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction how they sort of like divide that up.
Yeah, and that is another important thing to point out. I mean, we have a system here in the United States where we have thousands and thousands of police departments, and sometimes the rules kind of change a little bit from one to the next based on the needs of the communities that they're serving, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, certainly. Like, I mean, the police departments they're created and maintained by cities or villages or townships or whatever else. And so there's certainly like, I mean, they don't get to make the laws or enforce those laws, but if they're going to bring that in, then there's going to be a certain expectation of, we expect our police officers to be doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to meet those expectations for sure.
Another very interesting piece that could only come from someone that's actually doing the work. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Let me ask, do you think that there is any help in terms of filing a missing persons report if someone goes to the police station versus calling and having an officer respond on scene? Or
no, I mean, I don't think practically there's anything different.
Okay.
Sometimes you could maybe get a faster response going into the station, but to me, that's a roll of the dice. There could be days where 4 people are waiting to file a police report in a lobby,
right?
But there's no calls out on the road, so it's like you could wait inside, and you wouldn't have waited as long if you just called. So but to me, that's like a rolling the dice kind of thing.
That's really interesting. So it's hard to determine what the right step is there. I guess initially call and try to get a response. And if for some reason you're not getting the response quick enough, or maybe if you're not getting the response you expect, like for example, if they're not willing to take that report at that time, then go down to the police station, try to talk to someone else and have them take it.
Sure. Yeah. I can't, honestly, I can't think of any situation that I have experienced where people, would just refuse to take a report, like would refuse to take information that says like so-and-so's missing or not there. Even, like I said, even if it doesn't move from that, if a decision is made from someone that's going to be higher up than me,
right.
The decision isn't made that goes from like this informal, like information gathering, initial investigation into some type of formalization.
Data
of
entry.
It.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's no reason to not take that report.
Yeah.
So the only thing in my mind that comes to my mind is like, if you've got this like frequent flyer is what I would call them, people who make police reports all the time, and they sort of like abuse the system in a way. And it's like, listen, you came in last week and said this, and it wasn't this at all. Like we're not going to keep doing this. We're not going to keep wasting our energy and time and resources to take reports from someone who is notorious for not taking. It's like the boy who cried wolf. So right. I mean, like I could see that being at play. On
that's
some
a pretty
level.
Slim circumstance. I mean, yeah.
That's not the norm.
And it still points back to what we were talking about earlier, which is the context.
Yeah.
I think where I'm hearing this is probably happening in some of those smaller departments. If it is occurring, do you think that it would be helpful for the person that's trying to file to try to escalate it and talk to a supervisor?
Yeah, I think that's fine as long as as long as everything's done respectfully.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, and it goes both ways, 100%. But usually, you catch more flies, with honey, right? Is that what it is?
Honey than vinegar. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that's it. I don't even know if flies land on honey. It's usually bees. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, like, most of the time, like if an officer is confident in their job, like it doesn't bother me if someone says to speak with the supervisor. I always tell them, like, you're going to get the same answer, but I'm happy to call them for you, but you're not going to get a different answer. I know, because I've been doing this long enough. I know the answer to the question, but
Right.
you know, sometimes people just want to feel like they've exhausted every resource on their end. So it's never a problem to ask for a supervisor to speak to. I mean, I wouldn't do that if you just got pulled over for speeding. Like, I want to talk to your supervisor. You're not going to get a supervisor there. You're going to go to jail.
Right. Right. Another great tip that we could only get from an expert.
If the first words out of your mouth are, I want to talk to your supervisor, it's not going to end well.
Yeah. I've watched your videos, Mike. I know that I'm not supposed to tell you that I pay for your salary. I know that I'm not supposed to ask for your supervisor.
Right.
I know I'm not supposed to pull a weapon.
Right.
Okay, so I think really the big takeaway that I'm getting from this is, if you're trying to file a missing persons report, really be sure to get that context. Tell the officer why it is so out of character for them to be missing. Let the officer know about anything important. If there was a car that was seen, a vehicle, something like that. Potentially, if it is a child and you know that there might be some type of custody issue going on where a parent might be involved in the abduction or something like that.
I'm really glad you bring that up. If I have time to kind of address that real quick.
Please do.
That is actually, I'm kind of ashamed I didn't think about this situation, because it is super common where there is a custody arrangement and mom or dad doesn't bring the child back on time. That is not parental kidnapping. So now every state may have its shade of the levels or criminality and penalties for parental kidnapping. Like, even if dad was supposed to bring the kid back at 6 p.m. tonight,
right,
and he doesn't bring them back for 2 days, that's not parental kidnapping. That's a civil matter that has to be taken to civil court.
Okay.
Whatever court established those rules, the first step is taking it to that court.
Yeah.
Again, context would rule everything. Like, if mom brings in a video or audio, like, I'm taking our kid, you're never going to see them again.
Right.
Okay, now we have a potential issue. Now we might actually have a legitimate, they're taking their child out of the state and out of the purview of this agreement. We might have a parental kidnapping issue. But a lot of people think, okay, I'm pressing charges on my ex because he was late to the birthday party. How dare you? It's you can't do that. And people hate hearing that, but when we say, like, it's a civil matter, like,
right,
police officers only enforce the law. We don't enforce civil contracts. So you have to take it up with your attorney and the judge that you went through the process to get that arrangement made with. So it's a really, really common thing, and a misperception that, like, if they violate this, they're going to jail. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So in those cases in particular, is it helpful for the family to at least report it to you guys, to at least have it noted in some way?
Absolutely. They can be like, hey, we can absolutely take a civil dispute report. Okay. Those exist, right? So, like, we could, pull a report number or whatever, or make note of it in the system. How different departments handle that different ways, but, take note and say, person X came into the station and said person Y was supposed to return their kid, at this time based on the contract. I looked at the custody agreement. It appears to be the case. They were advised to contact their attorney in the court that issued the statement. Like, we make a note. So there is some, like, I guess, paper trail
right, that
an attorney would appreciate, or a judge would appreciate, in terms of saying, like, well, this parent has gone in 17 times in the last 4 months to say you're late. So then that judge could then, as part of that civil arrangement, change it in favor of the parent who's obviously gone in and made those reports.
Yeah. Yeah. And it would be important for them to do that because they need to be able to demonstrate that to the judge. Otherwise, you're going to get parents showing up in court.
Well, yeah, because if she just says he's been late 27 times, and he's going to say, no, I wasn't. I mean, like, how's the judge going to know? They're not.
Right. So once again, context is important. Don't try to tell the officer what their job is. Let them know the context of the situation, and then you guys will suggest if it is a missing persons report versus this is just a notation of some civil disagreement.
Right.
Excellent. Excellent. Any other thoughts or feedback that you have on this topic that you want to touch on before we sign off?
No, just be patient. You know, it's a tough situation if someone finds themselves needing to make a missing persons report. And what happens is people want results immediately.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can get them. You know, sometimes it's been like I'm in the lobby and I tell somebody, hey, go over and check at such and such an address to see if they're there. And we've already found the kid before mom ever leaves the lobby. You know, like,
right. That's
great when that happens. Like, but, you know, hopefully understanding as passionate as you are about finding it, you know, it's not always an immediate fix.
Right. Right. It's a process. All right, Mike, thank you so much for joining us here today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
And your expertise on this. And
I wouldn't go that far. I just experienced, not expertise. But yeah.
It's still valuable insight that it's very hard to get. And I hope if I have any other questions like this, maybe we can do this again in the future and you can help shed some more light on it.
Anytime, man. Anytime.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And that is it for today's episode of Searchlight. Once again, thank you to Mike the Cop for spending so much time helping us understand some of the challenges in terms of filing a missing persons report. I hope each and every one of you out there has an excellent day, and I'll see you back here tomorrow on the Lord and Arts channel.